It's 9 o'clock, Ernie. We can get started.
Okay. Um, what are we going to do? Play the anthem, right?
Yep, that would be right now. I'll get it up. Get that started. Make sure. Hold on. I think I didn't have the sound ready. Okay, Ernie. I think. Hold on. Are you muted?
Am I muted?
No,
No,
you're
I'm
not. Go
not.
ahead.
I'm
You're
with
ready to
you.
go. Go ahead.
Okay, I want to welcome everybody and to this meeting. Mitch Palley has been a very important force on Long Island for many years. He was the vice president of the Long Island Association, and he's had important jobs with the MTA. And now he's been the executive director. I think it's called the executive director, is it not, Mitch?
Chief
For the
Executive Officer.
executive officer, CEO of the
Right.
Long Island Builders Institute. And at this point, he is now contemplating what we're going to be doing with the undeveloped, underutilized shopping centers that have been vacant. So good morning, Mitch, and welcome to Limba. Well, we want to get in our program sponsors. Mike Salati is representing GPI this morning, and I want you to talk about your company and some of the services that you provide, Mike.
Mike, I'm unmuting or asking you to unmute now. You should be able to. 1 second. Let me just find you here.
Mike, you have to unmute.
Okay. Okay, now it's working because it didn't unmute it first. All
There you
right. So good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. I'm not really going to say too much. Greenman Peterson's, one of Long Island's largest transportation engineering consultants, and we've been in business for 55 years. But we're just happy to hear what pearls of wisdom Mitch has to tell us all, because for us, there's been a dearth of projects and activity in the design and construction area over the past year. We've managed pretty well last year with a great amount of backlog, but we're looking forward to some positive changes as we get into 2021. So I thank you, and I know Mitch will probably do a great presentation like he always does. Thank you.
All right. Do we have the representative from Habitat? And I don't think we do, but we do have a slide, Frank.
Yep. Yep. It should be on the screen now.
Well, we still have the GPI on the screen.
Oh, that was my fault. Hold on. There's Habitat.
Okay. Habitat for Humanity has been doing a tremendous job. Since their representative is not with us at the moment, I'll be doing a little bit of talking about it. They build homes for people who are in need of homes and can't otherwise afford them. But they also have a program where people who want the homes can work on building the homes themselves. I think that's a very important part of their mission because it gives people some ownership in that endeavor, as well as being a recipient of the good work that they do. This is an organization that I've personally felt a little bit of allegiance to, because personally I like to build things, and I have built several houses myself, not with Habitat, but on my own. So it's a great organization. If you can support it, please do. I think it's a worthwhile thing for the community. Where are we going from here, Frank?
I think that we usually let Mitch, the speaker, give
Okay, great.
turn the table over to him for a bit.
Yes, Mitch has been a friend, a personal friend, and a guy who I've had a tremendous amount of respect for and a good relationship with. And so I welcome you today, Mitch, and I want to thank you for taking the time out to do this.
Not a problem. Anytime, Ernie, you know that. And thank you all very much for coming on this early in the morning on a beautiful Friday morning before the snow hits us again here on Long Island. Ernie asked me to talk about the transformation of Long Island, and especially the transformation of our existing office and retail complexes into residential. That issue is becoming a major focus of many of us in the governmental and construction industry over the past couple of years. We have seen the tremendous impact, which not only COVID, but before COVID, just the transformation of the economy is having on big box retail, shopping center retail, even office buildings in that regard. And so the question that comes up is, what do we do with them? Do we just let them sit there vacant for some period of time, or do we try to transform them into other uses? And that's what we have been working on at our Long Island Builders Institute. We've been working very closely with the Suffolk County and Nassau County Planning Commissions and County Legislator Kara Hahn, who's been tremendously supportive of the efforts in this regard, to try and figure out what can we do next. In many other parts of the country, the transformation of these large big box and neighborhood shopping centers has already taken place. They've been transformed into a variety of different uses. As we know, Amazon is going to have 6 or 7 different last mile facilities on Long Island, and in some places in the country, that has become where they have gone into the existing shopping centers. We're looking at it not only from that perspective, but from a different perspective. Long Island, as we all know, is significantly below both the national average and our local competing jurisdictions with regard to the number of rental apartments. Rental apartments on Long Island are between 20 and 21% of all housing units. In Westchester County, they're 37%. In northern New Jersey, they're 40%. And these apartments, whether they're affordable apartments, studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, are a significant option for some parts of the Long Island community. And here's why. Long Island's housing market is a circle. When I put my house up for sale, one of these days, my house here in Stony Brook, from where I am speaking, somebody is going to buy it. That person most likely already lives on Long Island, because we do not get a lot of people coming to buy houses from off of the island. It just, our economy, it is the way we are. At some point, our rental apartment, people who are in the rental apartments who already live on Long Island, are going to move into their next phase of their life, and they're going to want to buy a single family home. They're going to most likely, if they're going to they're going to buy that single family home on Long Island if they want to stay here, if their career is here. If they're not here already in a rental apartment, they're not buying my house and they're not buying your house. And that's one of the reasons why, as you can see, housing prices for single family homes continues to go up. It's because we have both a declining supply, because we don't build many single family homes on Long Island anymore in the numbers we used to, because the land is not available, and because we have a significant demand, both from Long Islanders who have now decided to move out of their apartments where they started their career and their life on Long Island into other places. So we look at where are the best places to build apartments. We've obviously built them in many outlying areas. We've now gone into the downtowns, in many of the downtowns, whether in, we can come up with a whole list of downtowns which have had successful apartment developments, whether it's Patchogue or Westbury or Mineola or Farmingdale, and you can pick a number of others. Building in a downtown area is very difficult because you don't have the land available. And as we all know, on Long Island, we have significant height limitations, not because we can't go higher, but because the community will not let one go higher. As I always say on Long Island, we're still looking for the fourth floor, and we can't find it in many places. So what does that require you to do? It requires you now to look at other options. We've town of Huntington has looked at the Melville corridor. People no longer want to take the significant ride to and from it. They want to work and live near themselves. And in fact, in some places, right where they work. In Huntington, that means the Melville corridor, where you can put residential within the office buildings. And I was on the committee in Huntington, which created that. And hopefully one of these days, the town of Huntington will pass that. Smithtown is now going to include housing in the Hopog Industrial Park area. Our relationship with HIA made that happen, and that is going to happen so that people who live in the park and work in the park together in that regard. And as you know, much of the neighborhood retail is around it. What we're looking at is the next step is taking underutilized shopping centers, ranging from Smith Haven Mall, which I live across the street from, or neighborhood centers, and say, what's best for them? Their vacancy rates are going up. The likelihood that they're going to find new big box stores. We can only have so many gyms on Long Island, in that regard. We can only have so many Amazon places. Why not transform those properties into partially residential components with apartments, both for our young people and for our seniors who now want to do stay on Long Island, but want this type of lifestyle. You'd have the ability to walk to your retail neighborhood uses, and you'd be able to live where you work. In addition, it's good for the environment because we're not knocking down any trees. Basically, all we're doing is building on cement, which already exists. In many of these places, you already have either sewage treatment plants or connections to sewers, which, as we know, is an essential component of development in Suffolk County. Nassau County having a much greater percentage of their property with sewers. We've already gotten the Suffolk County Health Department to reduce the sewage septic flow for smaller apartments from the normal 600 gallons to 400 gallons. I know that doesn't mean a whole lot to people who are not in the development community, but in the development community, that's a big deal because now you can build more what we're calling micro apartments for young people, especially around our universities where our young people want to live. So from our perspective, it's a win-win. Why is it good for the community? Because sooner or later, the owners of these properties are going to figure out, why am I paying taxes, real property taxes, at a rate that includes my doing business when I don't have any tenants. And they're going to grieve their taxes and they're going to win. And all that does is reduce the amount of real property taxes our local communities get. So we look at it as a win-win for everybody. We're working with a number of municipalities to try to make this happen. The town of Brookhaven, with our support, has already passed an overlay district zoning for underutilized shopping centers and retail establishments in the town of Brookhaven. We've had discussions with a number of the other towns about doing the same thing in that regard so that a developer would know this is what I can get from this. And from our perspective, it makes a lot of sense. We're not saying take over the entire shopping center, but take over portions of it and put residential apartments there in that regard. It's good. It's good for the environment. It's good for the economy. It's good for the local community. It's good for the regional community, but keeping people here and they're going to buy stuff and for our sales tax revenues. And it's good for the state of New York. So we look at this as a win-win. We're hopeful. The first redevelopment of any size that will hopefully happen is in the town of Oyster Bay. The Seritage Seritage Development Group has a proposal in for the old Sears site on 106, 107, about a quarter of a mile from the train station. And they already had their public hearing. We have expressed our great support for this project, and we're hopeful that the town of Oyster Bay will approve this redevelopment. There are other proposals in various stages, whether it's the Sunrise Mall that you just saw changed hands, Macy's in Manhasset, which has more parking spaces than I think Citi Field does. And it gives you an opportunity to redevelop Long Island in a way in which it benefits everybody. So that's my proposal. That's what we're working on. That's what we're trying to help our developers and our municipalities get to. It has been tremendously beneficial in other parts of the country, and we don't see any reason why it can't be beneficial on Long Island. So with that, I'd be more than happy to talk about it, answer any questions on any specifics or anything else that anybody has. Thank you, Ernie.
Just 1 minute, Mitch. Ernie somehow got on mute.
Yes, I see that.
Okay, Ernie, you should be able to unmute.
Okay. All right. I have first of all, before we go any further, I neglected to recognize the people who will make all of this happen on an annual basis, and they're our major contributors. That would be Covanta, Energy, National Grid, Lewis Joe's law firm, and the Gershow Recycling. These people are a major contributor to what we do, and without them, we probably would not be in operation in this year. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And from that point, we can take a few questions, and I have a couple of questions of my own.
Ernie, just 1 minute. Lee Silverman from Habitat for Humanity was on the call, and we did not let him speak. So just give him a minute to talk about Habitat.
Okay, go ahead.
Lee, you should. I'm sorry about that, but you're unmuted now.
Okay, not a problem. Good morning, everybody. I'm Lee Silverman. I'm the CEO of Habitat for Humanity of Suffolk County. I was definitely interested in Mitch's presentation. In the redevelopment of these shopping centers, hopefully there will be an affordable housing component to these. There is an affordable housing crisis on Long Island. It's in every town from the Nassau border out to the East End. At Habitat Suffolk, our mission is we kind of solve it one house at a time. We are in Suffolk County, we are a single home builder. And currently we're ramping up to do 10 houses, in the coming year. We are the only home ownership program nationwide that serves a community making between 40% and 60% of average median income, which in Suffolk County, you're talking about families earning about $50,000 a year. And as I put into the chat, in response to someone's comment, even towns like East Hampton are becoming supporters of Habitat, because without the homes that we build in the community and the population that we serve, where are the workers going to live? With COVID, we had stay-at-home orders, obviously, shelter-in-place orders, and it really accentuates the problem of, if you don't have a decent place to live, how are you sheltering at home? There was a very high correlation between the worst spots in Suffolk County for COVID and the communities in which we build. So hopefully the people on this call, in addition to supporting Mitch's proposals to convert these shopping centers into housing, which is a great idea, hopefully you can also support Habitat for Humanity and the mission that we do. May 17, we're doing a clay shoot as a fundraiser out in Yaphank. And on August 30, we're doing a golf outing at the Hamlet Windwatch. And there was one question in the chat as to what's the biggest stumbling block that we encounter. For us, it's getting land. Land in Suffolk County is a fortune. Even undesirable building parcels go for over $100,000 an acre. Over $100,000 for a parcel. We depend on donated land from the county. The program from which the county donates the land has kind of dried up over the years. And anyone that has influence with your county legislatures, be great to put in a good word for Habitat so they can throw a few parcels our way.
Mitch, is that a possibility that some of these things could be appropriated that way?
Well, obviously, any development that goes on requires an affordable housing component. So, that's not a question with us. We are a strong supporter of affordable housing building on Long Island, and will continue to do so. So, it's all, as Lee clearly points out, it's all a matter of cost. Okay, what's the cost going to be for the development? What's the issues going to be with the septics? In whatever community you're in. That's why it's very difficult to say, well, this is what's going to happen. Each community is different, and each site is different, and each set of characteristics is different.
Mitch,
But
I wanted to ask
no matter what, it will include one.
One of the focuses of LIMBA is transportation issues and how to get people from here to there. And I know it's been your focus too, because you've been with the MTA and you've done your part in that. These parcels are not necessarily friendly to good transportation, are they?
Well, in most cases, if they're on main roads, there's already a bus system running by it. We tend to think about transportation on Long Island in either one or two categories, either your single car or the train. There's something in between. Suffolk County has a bus system. It may not be as extensive as many of us would like it to be. Nassau County has a much more extensive bus system, but the bus system can play a major role here, because if I'm building a number of apartments in the same place and they all work in the same place or may go to the same place, then the bus system can be an integral part of their transportation needs. The problem with Long Island's bus system, at least in Suffolk County, is that we're so spread out that we have different people going different places. That is not how a bus system works. But if I have 300 apartments at the Smith Haven Mall, and most of those kids are working at the Stony Brook Hospital or going to the university or whatever, then I run a bus directly there. Stony Brook University already runs a bus there now. So, as I said, I think we need to expand our analysis of the transportation system to include the bus system in Suffolk County.
When I lived in
very helpful.
When I lived in Manhattan, I never worried about my car because I didn't have it.
Right.
I left it at my mother's house in Queens, and if I had to go out to the Hamptons or to the Fire Island, I'd go over to her house and pick up the car, because anything I wanted to do in New York City was easily attained by getting in a cab or getting in a subway or a bus.
Right.
So we'll never get to that point.
No, we will never get to that point, but we can get to a point where you will be able to do more and more of your normal activities without a car if possible. But that requires locating these type of apartments and others in places where the other services exist. If I'm living in a downtown area in downtown Patchogue or Mineola or most of these places, I'm already doing most of my shopping but without a car, because I could just walk down the street and there are all the services necessary. If I'm out in one of the some other places, I need a car to do everything. What do I always say? If you need to get a car, you need your car to get a bottle of milk. We haven't accomplished anything. Okay, so I want to make sure that these apartments in these shopping areas already have the services around them which are necessary for most activities.
So they would, in these shopping centers that you're converting to other purposes, like for residents, you would have the ability to shop by a foot walk.
Right. Well, here's a perfect example. And I hate using Smith Haven Mall as an example, but I live across the street. Okay. So I know the mall. You take the Pennies and the Sears, both of which are now out of business. Okay. And you put 300 apartments there. Those people can walk to any service they need. There are supermarkets within 100 feet. There's banks. There are clothing stores. There are medical facilities. There's obviously retail shopping because you just go to the mall, which we're not talking about taking over the entire mall. There are restaurants. And then if they work at the hospital in Stony Brook, they get on a bus. So that's a perfect example of how the redevelopment of these sites and transportation can work together.
I'd like to open it up to anybody else that has questions.
Yeah, we have some questions in the chat. Mitch, this is Frank and Virgil from Desktop Solutions. I have a question before we read the chat ones, and that's about market forces and the affordability of these proposed units. As we've seen on Long Island with retiree housing, builders tend to, of course, go for the highest dollar. And so while it sounds warm and fuzzy to build 55 plus housing, when you look at what they're actually building, you're talking about $700,000 condominiums. So what's to keep the same effect from happening here, where we're not really helping the feeder end of the market because all of these apartments are high-end luxury units?
All of these apartments, I can assure you, most apartments on Long Island at the moment cost about a single bedroom $2,200. That's the average. Okay. I'm not arguing. The reason people build over 55 communities is because that's what the community wants. Why? Because they want high-end facilities with no children. Okay. Children is like the dirty word on development
because
on Long Island in many communities. Heaven forbid we have another kid. Okay. So they get tax revenues without children. And that's why the school district in most cases doesn't oppose it. If left to its own devices, people will build all across the spectrum. And that's what they do now. Just go to Ronkonkoma and see what TriTech is building there. Phase 1, phase 2 is going to start this year. They're going to end up with 1,200 apartments. Those 1,200 apartments are in the mid-range because people know that's the market. The market is there. The reason rents go up is because we don't have enough supply. If we had more apartments to do, you'd find a much different range of apartments. Plus, in this case, most of these are going to be smaller in that regard. And therefore they're going to, whether they're going to be studios or one bedrooms, as I said, heaven forbid we have another child. And that's going to open up an all new avenue to young people. In most cases, if you look at in the Ronkonkoma, we just had a discussion with the TriTech people the other day.
Well, me and Mitch are not having another child.
Right. A third of their apartments are first-time renters. A third of their apartments are over 55 people who have sold their house, lived on Long Island, and want to stay there. The other piece is people in the middle. I cannot tell you, just look at the numbers. The demographics of Long Island is changing. There are more people today in single family in one parent households
Yeah.
than ever before. Many of those people want apartments either because they're on their own now after a divorce or because they only have one child to take care of. That's the demographics of Long Island, and our apartments are trying to connect all three of them. And I will tell you, you cannot build rental apartments fast enough on Long Island. They get rented before they get built. That's the demand which is there.
And that's what developers will meet, not
Yes.
the hyper
That's what developers
55 plus.
Yes. But as I said, 50 people over 55 have an opportunity to go there, but these are not going to be designed just for them.
Well, and it's really, yeah, and the pricing specifically.
We understand.
Yeah.
We understand.
I'm going to read a question from the chat. David Pinkowitz asked, I've heard that building codes in some towns greatly discourage affordable housing. Do you agree? What can be done?
Well, the building codes in many towns, it's not so much the building code per se, it's the zoning code. That's what discourages the building of apartments and these type of redevelopments. So we have to go municipality by municipality and change the zoning code. That's what Brookhaven did to at least allow you to do an overlay district. That's what Smithtown did in their overlay district in the HIA industrial park. We have to go town by town, village by village to make this happen, because all of these properties at the moment are zoned retail or office. They're not zoned residential. So we have to change the zoning in either individually by each property or collectively across the board to allow this to happen. That is one of the great impediments to making this happen at any great level. But
Is that because there's a different rate?
I'm sorry?
I'm wondering, you said that's an impediment, but what about the reason? Is it because they don't collect as much taxes?
No, they just don't want more apartments. There are certain.
Got to go in front of these zoning boards,
Right.
which drag their feet dramatically. It's terrible.
But my question is this: is there a difference in the amount of revenues that the?
Well, yes, there are. Yes, in most cases, commercial properties pay a higher rate in some places. Okay, or at least the assessed valuation is different. That's especially true in Nassau County as opposed to Suffolk County, because Nassau County has 4 classes of property. The only and Suffolk County has 1. The only town on Long Island which has 2 is Iceland. They have a homestead rate and a non-homestead rate. So yes, because of the assessed valuation of the properties, retail and office properties pay higher taxes. But that's at the moment. The redevelopment of these properties will allow those payments to continue, because sooner or later, with the vacancies that are occurring, people are going to grieve their taxes and they're going to win. And then the municipality is going to be on the negative side.
And isn't it true, Mitch, that a lot of these strip malls, when they were built, bargained for abatements with the localities because they were going to bring jobs in?
Well, you can't. No, in most cases, you cannot get abatements on retail. IDAs are forbidden to do retail. That's in state law. So it's not a question of they got abatements. It's a question of they were built 20, 30, 40 years ago when Long Island was developed along the main corridors. They're still there. It may have been the best use of that property 40 years ago. It's not the best use of that property today.
So the abatements are no, if they exist, it don't matter at this point.
That's correct.
Uh-huh.
That's correct.
So we have another question from the chat here from Peter Gollin. How can developers be convinced to build in the most environmentally friendly way, the most efficient building construction with heating and cooling using heat pumps instead of burning gas? We need to address climate change now in new construction's demands, and techniques need to adapt to the most pressing need.
Well, we are working. We have people, as you know, New York State passed last year, 2019, a new climate action plan, and they're in the process of putting together a plan at the moment for that. There is a committee on land use. There's a committee on housing. We have representatives, not we, our state association has representatives on the housing group. And in fact, they met yesterday in that regard, because I was just looking at the minutes from the meeting. And I think, energy efficiency is an integral part of all of this. There's no question about it. You have the ability to do more solar on these type because it's more cost effective in regard to this. I think you're going to see that happen as more and more people. The reason nobody did heat pumps on Long Island is because under 25 degrees they didn't work. Okay, and PSE&G will tell you that now with the new technology, now they're starting to work, but that's going to take a while for people to get integrated to and to get comfortable with. Because the last thing they want to do is when it gets under 25, not have any heat. At least with oil heat or gas heat, they know they're going to have heat.
Mitch, you said under 25 degrees. They use these in very cold climates too.
Now they do. Now under the new technology, they do.
But these are underground systems. Are you talking air to air?
I'm talking about the new heat pump technology that is now available. And that is why PSE&G and LIPA are proposing it. That's why there's subsidies to do it. I think you'll see more and more homeowners and more developers go in that direction over a period of time. It's much easier to do it when you have the density available to do it. It's much easier to put solar panels on a apartment complex that had 400 units than it is to go house to house to house to house. So I think you'll see more of that in the coming years.
Now, I don't know how many stories these apartments are going to have.
Well, in most cases, you're not going above 3 stories because that's the maximum most of these municipalities will allow.
But
so I don't see
that relates to my question. If you have a rooftop that'll service so many apartments,
right?
It's not going to service enough apartments if it's too high.
Yeah, well,
because you have.
Right. I'm not an engineer. All I know is it's a lot easier to do it on a larger basis than is on an individual home basis. And I think you'll see as more and more people become comfortable with it and more developers become comfortable with it and the cost comes down, that these type of energy efficiency will be incorporated. We're already incorporating in the state building code a wide variety of energy efficiency measures that are already there that we build to now. And I think you'll see that even expand in the next couple of years.
So we have a question from Jennifer Lewis, PWGC. Has there been any focus on utilizing the New York State DEC's brownfield cleanup program for lightly to heavily contaminated sites to lessen the cost burden of redevelopment? As Long Island qualifies for tangible property tax credits, the cost of remediation can actually offset the cost of the new development.
Well, the answer to that question is it depends. Okay. Yes, there are sites on Long Island that are in the brownfield program, and many of them, here's what happens in many communities. They want the developer to remediate the site, but not to redevelop it. And you can't have one without the other, because the only way the developer makes back the money that they put into the remediation plan is to redevelop the site. We even had to sue the town of Hempstead on a housing development with regard to that they had initially rejected. So, and there's one going on now in Port Washington, where we have a proposal from one of our members to remediate a site along the waterfront, but also to be able to redevelop it into apartments. You can't have one without the other. And so the use of brownfield sites on Long Island is always an issue. Yes, it is somewhat more expensive because you still have to remediate the site, but then to make that up, the community has to be willing to provide the density necessary for the developer to recoup their cleanup costs. Because in all of those places, the state of New York does not pay for the remediation. It does to some degree with tax credits, but most of that money is private money.
We have a comment here referring back to your illustration of Smith Haven Mall and pedestrian traffic. And that's it, and it's true. They're large, high volume roadways. You can say that people can walk to these areas, but not crossing 347, they're gonna.
Well, you don't have to cross 340.
Well,
Listen,
that particular example, but the suggestion here was, is there any discussion for pedestrian bridges, trolleys, or other things that might make it more pedestrian friendly?
well, listen, anything you put in costs money. Okay. Anything you put in, you give me the ability to put in 1,000 units instead of 100, I can afford things like that. You give me 100 units, I can't afford things in that regard. It's really going to be up to the local municipality as to what they want in that regard. There's a trolley now that runs from Stony Brook to Port Jefferson. Okay. There are opportunities to do
That's
that.
Chamber of Commerce funds that, if I'm
Right,
not
that's my
mistaken.
point. Okay, there are opportunities to do that in that regard. As you know, the state is going to continue its redevelopment of 347. As I said, I live right across.
Is that right?
Right, okay. It stopped now in Smithtown. It's going to end up one of these years getting to Port Jeff Station, we hope, in that regard. So it has improved the ability for pedestrians to cross the road. But as I said, anything that is put up is going to require money. Either the public doing it, and hopefully we will have a new infrastructure bill from Congress to help us in that regard, or a private developer to do it. And their ability to do it is going to be directly dependent on how many units the community is willing to give them.
So
Just wanted to
question-
recognize that we have a legislator Krupski in the audience.
All right.
And if there's any other officials in the audience, make yourself known.
Then you could do that through the chat, or there's a way to raise your hand in the software, and then you'll show up with a little green arrow. Otherwise, I won't know to unmute you. With 59 people in the meeting, we can't just leave everybody's mic open as you might be used to in a smaller Zoom setting. So I don't know, should I unmute Legislator Krupski?
If he wants to say something.
I'm going to allow him to unmute if he would like. He's saying it's a great conversation.
And I will tell you, as Al knows, and I will always appreciate his input, we have had very interesting discussions with the town of Riverhead for properties along Route 58. Route 58 in the town of Riverhead, for those of you who've been out there, is their main retail corridor. They have a number of sites which are now prone for redevelopment because the current tenant has gone out. One of the sites just got approved by the town the other day to move from Toys R Us to a new supermarket in that regard. And they have opportunities there to do retail right there because they have sewers, which is as we all know, an integral part of redevelopment locations in Suffolk County. So we're hopeful that Riverhead will move forward on some of those options in the next year.
If I could, Mitch.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, this is a great conversation. This is one that I've been really listening to about redevelopment projects for 30 years or more. And it does all come down to planning. And it comes down to working with the local municipalities on their planning documents. I'm really happy to see Mitch involved with Riverhead's, they're embarking on this planning document. And that's the time to look at how land use is taking place there and how it's changing and what the needs are. So I think, and I represent all of Southwold, all of Riverhead and Eastern Brookhaven. And so there is a lot of this vacant space that's been built over time where the infrastructure is in place. And so to work, with the community on that kind of redevelopment is, that's the process that needs to take place. So a lot of this conversation is very familiar to me. I mean, the school, obviously the impacts of the school on development and all that, that's been a long-standing conversation. I was on a 2-hour transportation meeting yesterday, because the bus system came up this morning, and Suffolk bus is a struggle because we are geographically so large, and so it is a struggle to provide meaningful service to people who need it And then it's the chicken or the egg. If you provide more service to certain areas, will you spur that use? Or do you need the use there in order to change the bus lines? And many of these bus lines, the routes haven't been changed in 30 years. So there's, certainly there's a lot of work to be done there. Any input
Mr.
would be welcome.
Krupski, I wanted to ask you a question about the process that you get into when you're changing, working with businesses and locations and realtors and all that. Is this an amicable situation, or is it a push and tug, or is it are people amenable to changing all of these things that you're working on?
Oh, I think that people don't like two things only: when things change, and they don't like when they stay the same. So there's kind of a, you have to do, I think, the proper outreach, and some of these planning things take years, but the proper outreach gets people to understand what their community is today and what their goal is for the future of that community. And I think that's the perspective that you have to look at. We're not looking at today. Look back to see what happened, look to other communities for some guidance, and then look forward to say, what do we want our community to look like in the future?
So you have to sell those ideas.
I launched in Southold the comprehensive plan 10 years ago. There were over 120 community meetings on, I think, 13 chapters of the document. And it took 10 years to complete because it was done in-house, but it was widely accepted by the community because it had involved them. So it can take a long time. I'm glad Riverhead's going forward with this because they have a lot of, they have a lot of potential there.
Claudia, did you raise your hand? Did you? Okay.
Thank you for having this forum. This is very good.
Thank you.
A little bit more input from the chat here. Senator, New York State Senator Anna Kaplan's staff is on the call and just wanted us to know that they were taking everything in, but did not want to distract or needed to speak, but that we do have New York State Senator representation on the call. And we have a interesting piece of information that new legislation from the federal government passed this morning means $182 billion to New York and another 1.5 trillion on the way. This is firsthand from Senator Schumer. This just was announced this morning. So some good news, actually. We heard in previous town hall LIMBA meetings that we were hoping that some of the federal funding might help Long Island in some of these projects. Another question that we had here involved and Mitch, I know this is in your backyard, the electrification of the Port Jefferson Railroad line. How do you think that might?
Well, we can listen. That was one of my. I think that's from Mike Ardolino. I think I saw Mike's thing.
How'd you know?
How did I know? Hello, Mike.
If it's Maglev, it's Ernie. And
I understand. Listen, I think it is. It is time, and I made this point. Listen, I spent 14 years as the Suffolk County representative to the MTA board, and promoting electrification, whether it's to Port Jefferson or to Riverhead, first to Yaphank, hopefully, and then to Riverhead, it has to be an integral part of Long Island's transportation system in the years ahead. Unfortunately, as we know, the MTA has, curtailed its 5-year capital plan because of its financial needs. I think we're all hopeful that it will be able to reinstitute it in the next couple of years as additional federal funds and other things become available. The problem with Port Jeff is it's a very difficult electrification system because it has curves. It only has one track. You may need to take some land around it for electrification just doesn't happen. You got to have the electricity there. And if you notice on Ronkonkoma, you see these big boxes along the right of way. Those are the electrical substations, which are essential now that we have 2 tracks to Ronkonkoma, which was something that started in the 1980s when I worked in the state legislature and finally glad to get it done a couple of years ago with the governor's assistance. And now, of course, third track in Nassau County, which is going to be finished next year in that regard. So there's no question that this is necessary. There's no question it would be helpful in that regard. We just gotta see where it is on the MTA priority list, and hopefully, even the current MTA excuse me, board member from Suffolk County, Kevin Law, who's head of the LIA, lives in St. James. So Kevin gets the Port Jeff connection also in that regard. So I think we will see it at some point. I'm just not sure when that timing is going to be.
So Mike Artolino has been asked to unmute so he can chime in, but I do ask you to keep it short so we have time for another topic before we end up today.
Sure. Just to your point, Mitch, I think the time has come, whether it's 2 years, 4 years, the downtowns along that whole line really need that resurgence. And a lot of those places, when those villages and little towns were built along the South Shore and the North Shore, were mixed use places, which was the way the towns developed. And you said something that, Long Island's changing. Long Island's changing a lot. And the people that we need to stay here need to maybe start out in those local downtowns again with the mixed use. So the more of us that understand that and help with it, will also keep our talent on Long Island.
Yeah, and providing a one-seat ride is essential, as you know now.
Yeah.
Most people have to change at Huntington because they have to move from the diesel line to the electric line, because Huntington is the end of the electric line there. I think the redevelopment of the downtown areas near the train stations is going to have to continue in those areas, especially downtown Smithtown near its train station. Port Jeff has started both on the village side on one side of the line and the town side on the other side of the line. Those redevelopments have to take place because that will bring more and more people an opportunity to use the train in that regard. And listen, we're going to have to see how many people are going to still work in the city.
Exactly.
That's going to be an interesting component as we come out of this pandemic. Does the railroad attract the 70% of the people who now don't take the train that used to?
Yeah.
And what's that going to mean for service? What's that going to mean for physical improvements? It's going to be a very interesting analysis as we go forward.
So we have a question about whether or not you think developers will look forward enough to install charging stations for electric cars.
I think as more and more people get electric cars, the answer to that question is yes. Listen, I'm the, an interesting component. I am the chair of the Long Island chapter of the League of Conservation Voters. Okay. And one of my pet peeves is every new gas station should have electric charging stations. Not go back to the old ones unless we want to, but new ones should have those also in that regard and be a requirement when they build them. The more and more opportunities we have to build electric charging stations, I think you'll see it. In fact, some of my developers are already doing it now with regard to putting electric charging stations, because more and more of their residents are getting electric cars. And I think that will only increase in the years ahead as electric cars become more of a part of our automobiles segment.
I just moved.
General
and I have a
Motors has said they
line
will
with it.
not be building an internal combustion engine in 15 years.
Right. Right.
So I would say that anybody who's going to be buying a car now is going to consider buying an electric car.
Right. But those numbers are going to have to substantially and will over a period of time. It's just a question of, how we get there.
I'm going to unmute Ron, who originally asked the question and would like to do a follow-up. Ron, go ahead. A few minutes, just a minute or two, please. Again, we have 5 minutes. We want to do some wrap up.
Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate the opportunity. Good morning, everyone. And hello, Mitch. We have, Mitch, I'm not sure if you're aware, and we'd love to reach out and maybe get together and meet and work with you. We have here on Long Island a 501c3 under the auspices of the U.S. Green Building Council, Long Island chapter under Sammy Chu, called Drive Electric Long Island. So we advocate for the acceleration of the adoption of electric vehicles and the requisite infrastructure for charging the vehicles. So Marge Isapor, the Director of Sustainability Renewable Energy Center at Farmdale State College, is our chair. We have a steering committee and we have an infrastructure subcommittee, which I chair. And we work very closely with PSEG and all the other constituents. We work closely with NYSERDA. There's a lot of funding, incentives. The New York Stretch Code now includes a requirement for 5% of make-ready for electric charging, 5% of the parking spots. You're probably aware of that.
Yep.
in your capacity. But there's a lot of funding coming. The PSC just did a white paper and a rate case, which is called.
Ron, I'm sorry, we have just a minute. Is there a question?
No, the question is, would you be willing to get together to learn more
Absolutely,
about?
anytime. Ernie, just,
Yes, I wanted to,
and I'd be more than happy to do so.
we're going to be wrapping up in a minute, but I wanted to make a plug for our funding. I want you to think of LIMBA as something like PBS or something like that, that we're producing programs that are helping the community. And if you'd like to make a small contribution, that's great. If you want to make a big contribution, that's better. But in any case, we appreciate what little and the people we get are doing. And we'd like to just remind you that if you'd like to be part of that, we'd like to help you. Frank, you take it from there.
Well, I wanted to point out, Ernie, that LIMBA has been around since the 1970s. And it was a breakfast meeting, as most people know, and that was the funding mechanism. But now that we've gone virtual, that doesn't work anymore. So we were hoping that the people who know LIMBA and appreciate these kind of forums will help us in a crowdfunding way. So we put a donation button on the website, and every little bit will help. And there's also a way to do it in an ongoing basis, maybe $5 or $10 a month, and that way the organization has some sustaining revenue.
On our next program, Frank, we're going to have a discussion on LIPA's change. Is it going to be continue as they're doing, or is municipal power a possibility, and what would it mean? So we're going to have Ryan Madden speak on that topic, and I think that should be an interesting topic. I know that municipal power companies operate on a different scale of cost, and it might be a good idea, but let's explore it. That's what we're going to do the next time. Thank you all for being here. Frank, you want to make a closing statement?
I just want to thank Mitch. We didn't thank him so much for his expertise. And
My
his
pleasure, anytime.
insight. And I have to say, I think I speak for a lot of the 50 some odd people on the call who don't have a microphone right now, that this proposal or idea is an exciting new chapter, perhaps in Long Island's history. Levittown was chapter maybe 1. Now maybe this is chapter 2 and 3. We certainly need something to change the trajectory.
Thanks again, Mitch.
My pleasure, anytime, Ernie. Take care.
We really enjoyed having you. Good to see you.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everybody. Bye.